The Happy Prince. Chapter 1. A Sad Statue. The statue of the Happy Prince was covered all over with gold. For eyes he had 2 bright jewels. There was also a bright red jewel on the handle of his sword. The people of the city liked him very much. "You are like an angel," children said to him as they came out of the church with their teacher. One night, a little swallow flew over the city. His friends had gone away to Egypt, but he had stayed behind. He was in love with the most beautiful reed. He had met her early in the spring as he was flying down the river, and had thought her so lovely that he had stopped to talk to her. "He is foolish to love a reed," the other swallows said to one another. "She has no money and a large family." This was true. The river was full of reeds. When autumn came, the other swallows all flew away. After they had gone, he felt lonely. "Will you come away with me?" he asked her. The reed shook her head. She wanted to stay at home in the river. "Then I shall leave you," the swallow said. "I am going to the pyramids. Goodbye." And he flew away. All day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city. "Where shall I stay?" he thought. Then he saw the statue of the Happy Prince in the center of the town. "I will stay there," he said. "It is a good place with plenty of clean air." So he flew down and sat between the feet of the Happy Prince. "I have a golden bedroom," he said quietly to himself as he got ready to go to sleep. Just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. "That's strange," he thought. "There is not a cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining." Then another drop fell. "What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off?" he asked. "I must look for somewhere else to stay." And he opened his wings to fly away. But as he did so, a third drop fell, and he looked up and saw the eyes of the Happy Prince. They were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden face. The Happy Prince's face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with sadness for him. "Who are you?" he said. "I am the Happy Prince." "Why are you crying then?" asked the swallow. "When I was alive and had a heart," answered the statue, "I did not know what tears were. I lived in the palace where there was no sadness. In the daytime I played with my friends in the garden, and in the evening I danced. If playing games and dancing are happiness, then I was happy. Now that I am dead, they have put me up so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the unhappiness in my city. That is making me cry." "Far away," continued the statue, "in a little street, there is a poor house. One of the windows is open. I can see a woman sitting at a table. Her face is thin, and her hands hurt because she works all day sewing clothes for rich women to wear. In a bed in the corner of the room, a little boy is sick. He is asking for oranges, but his mother has only water to give him, so he is crying. Little swallow, will you please take her the jewel from the top of my sword? I cannot move my hands or feet." "My friends are waiting for me in Egypt," said the swallow. "Little swallow," said the prince, "please stay with me for one night and do this for me. The boy is so thirsty and the mother so sad." The Happy Prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sad too. "It is very cold here," he said, "but I will stay with you for one night and do as you ask." "Thank you, little swallow," said the statue. Chapter 2. Giving to the Poor. The swallow took the bright red jewel from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his mouth. He passed by the church where there were statues of angels. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful girl came out to look at the stars with her boyfriend. "How wonderful the stars are," he said to her, "and how wonderful is love." "I hope my dress will be ready in time for the next dance," she answered. "The dressmaker is very lazy." At last the swallow came to the house. He flew into the room and put the large red jewel beside the woman's needle. Then he flew round the bed, fanning the boy's head with his wings. "How cool I feel," said the boy. "I must be getting better," and he fell into a deep sleep. The swallow flew back to the Happy Prince and told him what he had done. "It is strange," he added, "but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." "That is because you have done a good thing," said the prince. The little swallow began to think about this, and then he fell asleep. The next day, the swallow asked the happy prince, "Have you anything you would like me to do for you in Egypt? I am leaving now." "Little swallow," said the prince, "please stay with me one more night. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a small room. He is leaning over a desk that is covered with papers. He is trying to finish writing a play, but he is too cold to write anymore. There is no fire in the room, and hunger has made him weak." "I will stay with you one more night," said the swallow, who really had a good heart. "Shall I take him another jewel from your sword?" "I have no more jewels in my sword," said the prince, "but I have jewels as eyes. Take one of them out and give it to him. He will sell it and buy food to eat and wood for his fire. He will then be able to finish his play." "Dear prince," said the swallow, "I cannot take out your eye." And he felt so sad he began to cry. "Little swallow," said the prince, "do as I say." The swallow took out one of the prince's eyes and flew away to the writer's room. The young man had his head in his hands, so he did not hear the sound of the bird's wings. When he looked up, he found the beautiful jewel on his desk. "At last, someone likes my writing," he cried. "This is from him or her. Now I can eat, be warm, and finish my play." And he looked happy. The next day, the swallow flew back to the happy prince. "I have come to say goodbye," he said. "Little swallow," said the prince, "will you stay with me just one more night?" "It is winter," answered the swallow, "and the snow will soon be here. In Egypt the sun is warm, and my friends are waiting for me." "In the town square," said the happy prince, "there is a young girl who sells matches. She has dropped her matches onto the ground, and now no one will buy them. Her father will hit her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. Take out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not hit her." "I will stay with you just one more night," said the swallow, "but I cannot take out your other eye. You will not be able to see if I do." "Little swallow," said the prince, "do as I say." The swallow took out the prince's other eye and dropped the jewel into the match girl's hand. "What a lovely bit of glass!" cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow flew back to the prince. "You cannot see now," he said, "so I will stay with you always." "No, little swallow," said the prince, "you must go away to Egypt." "I will stay with you always," said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. Chapter 3. The Swallow's Death. The next day the prince said, "Little swallow, fly over my city and tell me what you see there." So the swallow flew over the great city, and he saw the rich enjoying themselves in their beautiful houses, while the beggars sat outside the gates. He flew into dark streets and saw the thin faces of children who had not eaten for many days. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. "I am covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off little by little and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy." Little by little, the swallow took off all the gold until the happy prince looked gray all over. The swallow gave the gold to the poor, and so the children ate well, and they laughed and played games. "We have bread now," they cried. Then the snow came. The little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince because he loved him so much. He picked up to eat and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings, but soon he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he said. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" "I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "I am not going to Egypt," said the swallow. "I am going to die of hunger and cold." He kissed the happy prince and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment there was a loud sound inside the statue, as if something had broken. The statue's heart had broken into two. Early the next morning, The mayor was walking in the square. As he passed the statue, he looked up at it. How gray the happy prince looks, he thought. The red jewel has fallen out of his sword, his eyes are gone, and he is no longer golden. He is little better than a beggar. There is a dead bird at his feet. Birds are not allowed to die here. This statue must be pulled down. I will put a statue of me in its place. Workmen melted the statue in a fire. What a strange thing, said one of the workmen. The broken heart in the statue will not melt. We must throw it away. They threw it away, and it landed next to the dead swallow. Bring me the two most precious things in this city, said God to one of his angels. The angel brought him the heart of the statue and the dead bird. The Devoted Friend. Chapter 1. Hans and the Miller. One morning, an old water rat put his head out of his hole. He could see a mother duck trying to teach her little ones how to stand on their heads in the water. The mother duck was being very patient with them. I couldn't waste my time like you, said the water rat to the mother duck. I am not a family man. Friendship is much more important than love. Nothing in the world is more important than a devoted friend. And what do you think are the duties of a devoted friend? Asked a small bird who was sitting in a nearby tree and had overheard the conversation. What a silly question, said the water rat. I should expect my devoted friend to be devoted to me, of course. Let me tell you a story on the subject, said the bird. Is the story about me? Asked the water rat. If so, I will listen to it. You will know if it is about you, answered the bird, and he flew down and told the story of the devoted friend. Once upon a time, said the bird, there was an honest and happy little man named Hans. He lived in a very small house by himself, and every day he worked in his beautiful garden. Hans had many friends, but the most devoted friend of all was the miller. The miller was so devoted to Hans that he never went past his garden without picking some flowers and fruit from the trees. Real friends must share everything, the miller often said, and little Hans was pleased that he had a friend with such good ideas. Sometimes, however, Hans's other friends thought it strange that the rich miller never gave little Hans anything in return. Hans never thought about this. He liked to listen to the miller talk about devoted friendship. During the spring, the summer, and the autumn, Hans worked in his garden and was very happy. But when the winter came and he had no fruit or flowers to sell, he was often cold and hungry. He was very lonely, because the miller never came to see him then. There is no good reason for me to go and see Hans while there is snow on the ground, the miller used to say to his wife. When people are not happy, they should be left alone and not have to talk to visitors. So I shall wait till the spring comes, and then he will be able to give me lots of flowers, and that will make him so happy. You are very thoughtful toward others, answered his wife. But why can't we ask Hans to come here? Asked the miller's youngest son. If he is unhappy, I will give him half of my food. What a silly boy you are, cried the miller. If Hans came here and saw our fire and our food and wine, he might feel envious of us. And envy is not a good thing to feel. It would make Hans a bad person. Also, if he came here, he might ask me to let him have some flour, and that I could not do. Flour is one thing and friendship is another. As soon as the winter was over and there were flowers in Hans's garden again, the bird continued, the miller planned to visit little Hans. What a good heart you have, cried his wife. You are always thinking of others. Take the big basket with you and fill it with Hans's flowers. Chapter 2. The Wheelbarrow. The miller was soon at Hans's little house. We often talked of you during the winter, Hans, said the miller, and wondered how you were getting on. That was kind of you, said Hans. I thought you had forgotten me. Friendship never forgets, said the miller. That is the wonderful thing about it, how lovely your spring flowers are. Yes, said Hans. I am going to take them to the market to sell, and buy back my wheelbarrow with the money I get for them." "Did you sell your wheelbarrow?" asked the miller. "I had to," said Hans. "I had no money to buy bread with." "Hans," said the miller, "I will give you my wheelbarrow. It has a few things wrong with it, and there is a hole in the bottom, but I am sure you can mend it. I know it is very generous of me, but I am not like other people. I think that generosity is important in friendship, and anyway, I have got a new wheelbarrow for myself." "Well, really, that is generous of you," said Hans. "I am sure I can easily mend it. I have a piece of wood in the house that I can use." "A piece of wood!" exclaimed the miller. "That is just what I want for the roof of my storeroom. There is a very large hole in it, and the flour will get wet if I don't cover it up. I am going to give you my wheelbarrow, and you are going to give me your piece of wood. The wheelbarrow is worth far more than the piece of wood, but true friendship never thinks about things like that. Please get the piece of wood." "Very well," said little Hans, and he ran inside to get the piece of wood. "It is not a very big piece," said the miller. "There won't be any wood left for you to mend the wheelbarrow with, but of course that is not my fault. Now, as I am going to give you my wheelbarrow, I am sure you want to give me some flowers in return. Here is the basket. Make sure you fill it." "Full?" asked little Hans sadly. It was a very big basket, and he knew that if he filled it, he would have no flowers left to sell at the market. "As I am going to give you my wheelbarrow," said the miller, "I would like some of your flowers. Do you think that's too much to ask?" "My dear friend, my best friend," cried little Hans, "you may have all the flowers in my garden." Then he filled the miller's basket with his flowers. Chapter 3. The Neglected Garden. The next day the miller visited Hans again. He had a large sack of flour on his back. "My dear friend," said the miller, "please carry this sack of flour to the market for me." "Oh, I am so sorry," said Hans, "but I am really very busy today. I have a lot of work to do in my garden." "Have you forgotten," said the miller, "that I am going to give you my wheelbarrow? It is very unfriendly of you not to do something for me." "Oh, don't say that," cried little Hans, and he took the sack of flour from the miller and carried it to the market. He sold the flour for the miller and then went home. He was very tired. Early the next morning, the miller came down to get the money for his sack of flour, but little Hans was so tired that he was still in bed. "You are very lazy," said the miller. "As your devoted friend, I must speak the truth." "I am very sorry," said little Hans, "but I was so tired that I thought I would stay in bed for a little time." "Get up now," said the miller, "because I want you to come to the mill and mend my barn roof for me." Little Hans wanted to work in his garden, but he did not like to say no to the miller, who was such a devoted friend to him. "Do you think it would be unfriendly of me if I said I was busy?" he asked. "Yes, I do. Have you forgotten that I am going to give you my wheelbarrow?" "Of course I haven't," said little Hans. He went to the miller's barn and worked there all day. The miller came to see how he was getting on. "Have you mended the hole in the roof yet, little Hans?" asked the miller. "Yes, I have," answered little Hans, coming down from the roof. "Good," said the miller. "There is no better work than the work one does for others." "It is certainly good to listen to you," answered little Hans, sitting down to rest for a while. "I am afraid I shall never have such beautiful ideas as you have." "Oh, they will come to you," said the miller, "but you must make sure you understand what friendship is about. Now, you must go home and rest because tomorrow I want you to take my sheep up the mountain." Early the next morning, the miller brought his sheep, and Hans went off with them to the mountain. It took him the whole day to get there and back, and when he returned he was so tired that he fell asleep in his chair and did not wake up until the next morning. "I had a good sleep," he thought, "and now I can spend the day working in my garden." However, the miller came and asked Hans to do something for him once again. This happened day after day. Hans was unhappy about this, but the miller always reminded him about the wheelbarrow that he would get. So little Hans worked again and again for the miller, and the miller said many beautiful things about friendship. Then one evening, little Hans was sitting by his fire when the miller appeared. standing at the door holding his lamp. "My friend," cried the miller, "my small son has fallen and hurt himself, and I am going for the doctor, but he lives so far away and the weather is so bad that it will be better if you go to the doctor for me. As you know, I am going to give you my wheelbarrow, and so it is only right that you should do something for me in return." "Certainly," cried little Hans, "but it is very dark. Please lend me your lamp." "I'm sorry," the miller said, "but I need it myself." Little Hans walked for 3 hours in the dark through the storm. When he arrived at the doctor's house and told him about the miller's son, the doctor got on his horse and rode off to see the boy. Little Hans had to walk home. The storm got worse, and soon he could not see where he was going. He fell into the river and drowned. When the miller heard about Hans's death, he said, "His death is a big problem for me. I was going to give him my old wheelbarrow. It is so old that I won't be able to sell it. I don't know what I shall do with it. I was foolish to be so generous." "You should feel sorry for the miller," said the water rat. "He was too generous." "I am afraid you don't seem to understand the moral of the story," said the bird. "Do you mean to say that the story has a moral?" "Yes," said the bird. The water rat became angry. "Well," he said, "I don't want to listen to a story with morals." And he swam away. "How do you like the water rat?" asked the duck, who came up a few minutes afterward. "I am afraid that I have made him angry," answered the bird. "I told him a story with a moral." "That is always a very dangerous thing to do," said the duck. The bird agreed with her. Playlet, the devoted friend. "Why don't you ever see Hans during the winter?"
"There is no good reason for me to go and see Hans while there is snow on the ground, because he has no flowers. It makes him happy when he can give me flowers."
"You are very thoughtful toward others."
"Why can't we ask Hans to come here? If he is unhappy, I will give him half of my food." "What a silly boy you are! If Hans came here and saw our fire and our food and wine, he might feel envious of us. Envy is not a good thing to feel. It would make Hans a bad person. Also, if he came here, he might ask me to let him have some flour, and that I could not do. Flour is one thing and friendship is another."
Spring comes.
"Well, it's warm enough to visit Hans now. I will visit him to see how he is doing."
"What a good heart you have! You are always thinking of others. Take the big basket with you and fill it with Hans's flowers." The miller is in front of Hans's house.
"We often talked of you during the winter, Hans, and wondered how you were getting on."
"That was kind of you. I thought you had forgotten me."
"Friendship never forgets. That is the wonderful thing about it. How lovely your spring flowers are."
"Yes, I am going to take them to the market to sell and buy back my wheelbarrow with the money I get for them."
"Did you sell your wheelbarrow?"
"I had to. I had no money to buy bread with."
"Hans, I will give you my wheelbarrow. It has a few things wrong with it, and there is a hole in the bottom, but I am sure you can mend it. I know it is very generous of me. I am not like other people. I think that generosity is important in friendship. Anyway, I have a new wheelbarrow for myself."
"Thank you. It is nice to hear you talk about friendship. I have a piece of wood I can use to mend the wheelbarrow."
"A piece of wood is just what I need to cover the hole in my barn roof. As I am giving you the wheelbarrow, you can give me the wood. Come over tomorrow, and you can mend my barn roof. Now, I know it would make you happy to fill my basket with your pretty flowers."
The next day, Hans is at the miller's house. "Covering the hole in your barn roof was very hard work. The sun was so hot. I need to rest."
"Work that is done for others is the best kind of work. Tomorrow, I want you to take my sheep to the mountain."
"I do many things for you, yet you have not done anything for me."
"Why, Hans, I am giving you my old wheelbarrow. Don't be ungrateful."
"You are right. I am sorry. I just don't understand friendship as well as you do.
One day you will understand what a devoted friend I am to you.
Late one stormy night, the miller is at Hans's house.
Hans, wake up! My son is hurt and I need you to get the doctor for me.
Of course. May I borrow your lamp so I can see my way in the dark?
I'm sorry. I need the lamp to get back home. I am sure you will be fine. Now go!
Hans goes to the doctor's house. Doctor, the miller's son has been hurt. You must get to his house as quickly as you can.
I will leave right now on my horse. I'm afraid I can't take you with me. You can wait here till I get back.
No, thank you. I must get home. I am very tired and need to sleep.
Be careful. The river must be flooding with all this rain. Goodbye.
It is so dark and wet. I can't see where I'm going.
I am falling into the river, and I can't swim. If only my devoted friend were here to save me.
The miller later learns that Hans has drowned.
Hans's death is a big problem for me. It is very annoying that no one will take my broken wheelbarrow now. I suppose I was too generous to Hans.